Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be online here with you all today. My name is Emily Rodriguez, and I'm a Business Development and Commercialization Manager with the Ontario Centre of Innovation, and I'm based here now in Ottawa. So I wish to begin today's remarks by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Before we begin, we have here a couple of housekeeping items. Please enter your questions or comments in the YouTube chat. We will have a specific Q&A where the panelists can answer your questions. Feel free to also send us any follow-up questions to Audrey. The email is going to be up in a minute for you to see if you wish to send your questions that way. And as part of the innovation ecosystem here at the National Capital of Canada, I have the privilege to work in partnership with Invest Ottawa, Area X.O, the local universities and colleges, as well as our lovely colleagues at MyTax, to bring together our industries and academic communities with the goal of fostering collaboration, innovation, and bring economic development as well as positive impacts to our community. So today, we will have a chance to discuss more specifically how drones and advanced robotic technologies could be further developed, tested, and commercialized. Specifically, how through these collaborations between industry and academia, ultimately empowering key sectors, such as healthcare, emergency response, and inspection and delivery of dangerous or difficult areas. We will discuss the regulations, testing requirements, how to access training and testing facilities, as well as plan the commercial deployment of these technologies. In addition, we will discuss some current commercial examples of the development of these technologies and close up with a brief overview of funding opportunities that you can access to work on those collaborations. So now I will pass it over to my colleague, Tim Warlett, to introduce himself and the stellar panelists we have here today. Enjoy.
Thanks, Emily. Good to see you again. I am Tim Warland, and I work for MyTax. MyTax is a not-for-profit that provides funding for interns in collaboration with colleges and universities. Prior to MyTax, I spent 4 years at Invest Ottawa, including time at Area XO, which includes the DART facility. And before that, I worked at OCI. It's interesting because Emily used to work at MyTax, now she's at OCI, so a small world. I've long supported innovative businesses, providing support to help them grow, create employment, and contribute to an innovation economy here in Canada. Today, we're discussing unleashing potential, how drones and advanced robots empower key sectors. And we've got a diverse panel to address different aspects of this challenge. I'll let each speaker introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the discussion. And going alphabetically, I'd like to start with Omar. Hi, Omar.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Great. So, yes, I'm Omar Chowdhury. I'm project lead in transportation system management at the City of Ottawa. I come working here at the city for about 5 years, but I come with a background of having worked in the US for a number of years on the technology side in transportation. So deploying electronic toll collection systems, traveler information, traffic management systems. And now here at the city, I'm doing a lot of our work on our connected vehicles and our new emerging technologies. So Tim, back to you.
Great, thanks, Omar, and certainly a champion of the innovation ecosystem here in town. Suzanne, my former co-worker, how about you tell us what you're up to these days?
Well, thank you, Tim. So Suzanne Cork, I'm the Business Development Director at Area X.O. So I have the distinct privilege of working with all of our partners, many of whom are on the phone today, but then also all of our entrepreneurs and clients that are interested in commercializing their technologies. So I really try to bring together the entire ecosystem to support entrepreneurs as they're testing and developing, demonstrating, and commercializing their capabilities. And this is really, it's a dream job for me after spending 40 years in the technology industry and having seen, well, you just can imagine 40 years ago what technology looked like. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to watch the advancement, and it's moving quickly, and we're seeing a lot of really exciting things happening here in Ottawa. So I'm glad to be part of it.
Thanks, Suzanne. Drew Kelsall, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Why don't you say hi and tell us what you do at MDK?
Thanks, Tim. So yeah, I'm a lawyer at MDK Business Law. We're a smaller firm in Ottawa. We're more of a boutique that focuses on helping knowledge-based companies and tech entrepreneurs to get started and scale up sort of through incorporation all the way through the life cycle of a business. My primary focus is on more commercial contracting, licensing intellectual property, and privacy and data protection. So I generally help clients sort of construct their privacy policies and how they disclose that to the public, services agreements, that sort of thing. And yeah, we've been supporters of Invest Ottawa and AreaX.O for quite a long time. So thank you very much for having me here.
Great, thanks, Drew. And certainly an interesting area because we're, as we know, drones and robotics are greenfield, so there's a lot of challenges ahead of us. Kate Clausen, you and I met a couple of years ago. We did a webinar together, and you've advanced your career since then. Why don't you tell us how things are going at Indro Robotics?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Glad to be back and doing something like this. So I'm a training and regulatory specialist at Indro Robotics, and I came at the drone industry nearly a decade ago now from the training side of traditional aviation, and have really enjoyed being part of that rapid growth that Suzanne was talking about that this industry has seen since then. Indro, if you aren't aware, provides a full ecosystem of services from designing to manufacturing, building, testing, operating, and I support that work with training and regulatory guidance, particularly on the drone side of things.
Sure, and we'll get into that as we go along. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Laliberti from Carleton University. Hi, Jeremy.
Hello, Tim. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us here. I'm Jeremy Laliberti. I'm a professor at Carleton University here in Ottawa. I've been there since 2008, so 15 years this summer, primarily working in aircraft design, drones, and advanced materials. Those are areas that I conduct research in and teach in. Prior to that, I was at the NRC Aerospace Research Center for 10 years. I've been working with drones in one form or another since the early 2000s. I'm a drone pilot as well, and I work with undergraduate and graduate students at Carleton on a number of projects with industry, also with government labs as well in the Ottawa area and outside of Ottawa as well. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you. So I'd like to get into the discussion. I'll remind our audience that you can post questions in the chat, and we'll bring those up as we go through. But Jeremy, since you're on the hot seat, let's start with you. And of course, all of the panelists should weigh in on this. I know at Carleton University you've done a lot of work at the DART area, and I'd like you to expand on how different media, different areas, aspects of technology affect drone and robotic development, and how companies and entrepreneurs can design or develop a product in this space.
Yeah, I think it's a very exciting space. There's lots going on, lots of innovation happening, from industry side, government, and academia. I think some of the things that we do at Carleton really involve bringing in different disciplines and expertise from different areas. And I think that's key in this sector to really, enable these products to be developed. It's not enough just to be an expert in propulsion or aerodynamics or materials. You really need to consider software side of things, AI, human factors, public policy, social acceptance even. So all those things have to be sort of pulled together. It's important to have facilities like DART and the capabilities there where you can, meet those folks and bring everybody together in a place where you can kind of, conduct these experiments and develop products, such as, advanced drones and robotics.
Anyone else want to weigh in on the technology and the advancements in different sciences we're using to bring drones and robots to market? Kate, go ahead.
I don't mind jumping in. Indro's had a relatively recent new addition of Indro Forge at Bayview Yards. And through that, we've been able to expand the services that we can provide to organizations. So taking things right from like a napkin drawn concept right through to testing, training, operating through the facilities at DART. And having that in-house expertise for like prototyping, engineering, validation, operating, we're all in one place, all through Indro. So we can move things through to an MVP much more quickly than if you had to use like overseas manufacturing or needed to find and involve multiple parties. So, and then you get the added benefit that it's all Canada made, all Ontario made, all Ottawa made. So it's great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps that you've got a lot of experience in the industry, so you can help with that development. And anyone else talk about the different technical aspects of drones? All right, well, let's talk about abiding by rules and regulations. This is a tricky part. And Omar, I know you've got a lot of experience in this one. As I think about there are amazing opportunities to deploy drones and robots to help people, whether it's delivering products or services to the home. A great example I think of is the use of robots instead of guide dogs to help blind people or vision impaired people move around. But how will cities develop bylaws and regulatory frameworks to manage and safeguard the use of this equipment in an urban environment?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It's the use of a robot as a guide dog. I guess it's one of those things that I'm going to say 5 years ago, no one would have ever thought that that was something that we would actually possibly have as an opportunity. And I know I've seen I'll call it the Indro dog. I'm not sure what Kate is the official name is it, but the Indro dog walking around at Area X.0, and then the Dart is quite interesting. I think for that kind of application, which as long as the dog is not allowed to go off leash and start running around in the park and so forth, that's really, a mobility aid. And so that would come under very different sort of rules and regulations and so forth that don't, I think I'll say, generally apply for a lot of the other sort of type of applications. But, and then we need to make the differentiation between what we would call like a follow me robot versus a remote and tele-operated, and then a fully autonomous or automated robot. And all of those will have various, influences, because a follow me will have actually someone there helping it fall, and it doesn't just start driving on its own. And so the operator who's there will actually be making those decisions. But then it's also important that we just differentiate between the rules and regulations for aerial versus on ground, right? So Transport Canada and FAA, Federal Aviation Administration in the US, sort of handle the aerial side of things. When it comes to provincial and on ground robots, it generally is at the provincial and state level that first come in, where they have either what we would in Canada usually have a Highway Traffic Act. Down there, it's either a traffic code or a vehicle code, and that would set out the types of vehicles that are allowed within the right of way. And I know that the province is looking at what kind of rules and guidelines should be established for allowing an on-ground robot. And once those rules are established, typically what the province has been doing of late is actually having pilot programs. So it would require then a municipal bylaw that will allow these type of things. So e-scooters is a perfect example. They're not in every city everywhere in the shared mobility type of space. And that will be something that will come out eventually at the provincial levels. And some agencies have it and some agencies don't. The other thing, that's really kind of important is that every agency is going to be at a very different level in terms of comfort with technology. City of Ottawa, we're generally at the leading edge, sometimes bleeding edge of the technology, wanting to try things out, but always doing it in a safe and within the regulations. And every urban environment is different, right? If you've ever been in Toronto taking the GO train in the morning rush, it's like a flood of people coming out, and that sidewalk is jam packed, and that's going to be very different than and even here in the Byward Market, right, in Ottawa, and that's very different on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the summer versus very cold winter, Tuesday evening. Those things all have different impacts, and there's a lot of competition for that right away, right? We have the pedestrians, we have parking, we have bikes, and so forth. So those are all sort of types of things that as a municipality, we have to start considering in terms of rules and regulations and so forth. So in time, what I kind of expect is that, there'll be localized trials probably at first to allow these tools and devices to be able to kind of get a sense of it, get a level of comfort. They're probably, and you've seen it now with, the Airbnb and the Uber, where there's rules now in terms of, or talk about rules for capping the number of vehicles or number of ride hailing, because you don't want it to get out of hand. There's rules now about, sharing or using Airbnb and renting out places. So there probably will be some sort of scale and or licensing as to how you can kind of get your vehicle onto the roads. The number of vehicles, where they can go, all of those kind of things that will start to get formulated in time. And then the other thing I think that becomes really important is actually the ability to share data. right? So a municipality, for example, the city of Ottawa, we would generally be required under the pilot programs for a province to be able to provide them some guidance and feedback and information about what we found, how many devices we had, how far they traveled, and that kind of stuff. And so things like the Open Mobility Forum and the MDS 2.0, which is moving towards that kind of concept of being able to share where the devices are, monitoring and managing them, incident reporting, all of that kind of information, I think will slowly come to bear, as these rules and regulations kind of get set forth.
Sure. So just expanding on that one, Kate, I know Indra Robotics has got more of an international push these days. What are you seeing in terms of regulations, particularly on the drone side, if not robots?
Yeah, there's been some interesting advancements on the drone side, especially in Canada. We're really quite ahead if you do like a comparison across nations. Transport Canada, our past task force, is doing a great job of continually pushing the regulations forward in Canada. So this summer we saw the first draft of the proposed regulations, and the next batch will be for operations beyond visual line of sight in certain low-risk environments, and also the operation of heavier drones. So there's some really important components in there that will really enable Canada to move forward with some specific use cases. You think like if we can operate drones up to 150 kilograms, you start to think about agricultural spraying applications. There's some great work for like smaller scale cargo delivery. So there's some really interesting work. It's really going to open things up in terms of what can happen. And we're still a little bit away. It was the first draft, so there's a process to follow. So I think come 2025, we'll start to see some of that filter into everyday type operations. But that again kind of highlights the validity and the helpfulness of having a site like DART, because we can do a lot of that training and testing to validate what was proposed in the regulations and kind of ensure that things are going to be moving in the right direction and not going to run into any unforecasted snags with how those regs will actually roll out.
Oh, that's fantastic. Good to know that we're not just an innovative nation. We're also ahead in terms of regulations for this field. So that's fantastic news. Omar raised the topic about data, and this is really a tricky one. And I'm going to bring Drew into the discussion for this one. As we anticipate a rampant expansion of drones and robotic applications, we're going to see implications that relate to data and privacy. What can you tell us about privacy frameworks, upcoming regulations for AI, and even the impact of autonomous decision making?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. That's actually a really great question, and I think it's sort of very poignant for this topic, especially when we're talking about sort of regulatory and legislative frameworks and how that'll work with the deployment of the robotic and drone technology. We're actually in a really, really interesting sort of time for the development of these laws and regulations related to how these companies work with personal information, how the drones will interact with people in the real world. Like in the EU, I think they've got some of the robotic sort of grocery delivery drones going around, and just what information they're picking up, how it's being processed, where it's being transmitted. All of that is relatively new because it's such a new piece of technology that we really haven't interacted with. Really for like the things that the companies really should be focusing on, I guess, would be maybe focusing on sort of being transparent with the consumers, the public, in terms of how this information is being generated. Like if there's a drone flying over your backyard, what's the camera looking at? Are faces default to obscured? Are you collecting even indirectly license plates or biometric data that could be used for some other purpose? And just really developing policies internally to sort of make sure that the processing, collection, handling of personal information is secure and sort of aligns with the relevant privacy laws. Now that sounds a lot simpler than it actually is in practice, because I think Omar mentioned there's challenges with different levels being at different stages of comfortability with this technology, and that's sort of the same from the legal framework as well. You've got a myriad of different legislation out there that imposes different requirements on businesses depending on where you're doing business, where your technology is deployed. So if you're in Canada only, you need to abide by PIPEDA and any specific provincial legislation. Whereas if you're in the EU, you're in GDPR. California has their own, Virginia has their own, Australia has their own, China has their own. So, and none of them line up directly. So companies are sort of in this situation where the privacy laws and how this information needs to be handled isn't clear cut. And it's a great opportunity, especially at places like Area X.0, to interact with the members of government who will be making these decisions and updating these regulations. And like right now in Canada, it's very interesting because we're right in the process of trying to update our privacy legislation. It's been tabled a few times, an overhaul to bring it more in line with the GDPR. But unfortunately, it keeps dying on the floor every time a new election is called. So we're actually in a great opportunity for businesses to engage with the government and have their voices heard in terms of the development of these updates to Canada's privacy regime. And as part of those updates, include a new AI regulation. And I know the EU is working on one as well. And from that side of things, what they're really focusing on is they're really trying to hammer down these sort of high impact AI systems that are sort of things like employment related decisions, healthcare and emergency decisions, things like that. So making sure that there's a good process during the testing and sort of pre-commercialization process when you're really developing the technology to make sure that there are risk assessments being done, steps to mitigate those risks. And at the end of the day, just sort of a good sort of wholesome approach to how they're treating this data, what decisions are being made on behalf of people that these robots and drones are interacting with on a day-to-day basis. While it is very interesting right now, it's also fairly up in the air because none of this is concrete and governments are still figuring out what to do. I mean, ChatGPT, when it was launched, it sort of triggered a giant scramble within governments to see, like, how are we going to regulate this? How do we prevent this from being misused? So I think it's a great opportunity, like I said, for the businesses who are developing these technologies to really have a voice in what the AI frameworks and regulations will actually look like from a practical perspective.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. Jeremy, universities tend to be very forward thinking. What kind of assumptions are you making about data privacy and data protection and those?
Yeah, I mean, this is a major issue for us, and we, whenever we undertake a project that might involve personal data or personal information, we generally have to go through research ethics clearance to be able to, show that we can protect those data, we can protect the privacy of individuals involved, and this could be everything from surveys to focus groups, or flying drones and collecting images in areas where the public might be. So this is a really important consideration for us, to be able to protect those data. At the same time, respecting the privacy and the intellectual property of companies and government agencies that we partner with. There's some of the very same considerations there to ensure that information is, kept secure and used properly and used responsibly.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to chime in on this?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
I just wanted to quickly say that, just sort of reflecting on the comments that have been made, that really having a facility like the DART is irreplaceable with respect to bringing all the stakeholders together for exactly these conversations, and in a safe and secure space. So, everyone signs NDAs that's on the site. Everyone knows that when they're working together on the site, that it's for the purpose of moving everything forward and supporting one another towards commercialization and towards answering some of these really difficult questions. And the other point I just wanted to make quickly is, Omar and Area X.0 work together so often on pilots, right? So these pilot projects that we're talking about are really we have the benefit of doing them kind of in a insular environment at Area X.0 first, and then moving them more into an urban setting or into a commercial setting. So having that juxtaposition and having that opportunity to test and test and test in a very secure environment before we move something into a live pilot has proven to be very, very successful in the cases that we've already tried it out.
Great. Kate, you had a comment?
Yeah, and I think it flows well from that. So thanks, Suzanne. I think it's something that I've kind of been hearing. It's from the other panel members. It's really a larger conversation about social acceptance and in general. How do we ensure that that doesn't become the barrier for these technologies to be implemented? So if we can do that testing in a safe environment and validate things before we get out in the real world through these pilot projects, and even the conversations around AI and data gathering and privacy, like it all plays into that larger conversation that we need to be addressing.
Yeah, and I just add, like, the value that the city has, and certainly we've done more work on the connected vehicle side of things, but the value of having a facility where you can actually do all the testing both out of sight from everybody else, so you don't have to worry about like everybody and their grandmother taking photos of what's going on and sharing it online. You can do that sort of testing, but it also provides a facility where companies can demonstrate what they can do, right? And actually gain that first initial acceptance, which is through the regulators, through Transport Canada, FAA, and so forth, to be able to say, look, this can operate well, it can operate safely, it recognizes people, it won't run over the babies and the dogs out there when it is there. I mean, all of that stuff is important to be able to do, because if you can't get that first step of saying, look, we can operate safely, we can operate well, we can throw it through whatever tests you want, and the facility is there at Area X.0 with a DART and so forth to be able to demonstrate that. And once everybody can feel comfortable, then that next on-street, in a live type of environment is actually more, easier to get to.
That's very good points. I was just thinking, I feel remiss. We're almost halfway through the session, and we haven't explained what is DART. What does DART stand for? What does DART do? Where is it? So, Suzanne, who have been uncharacteristically quiet, why don't you chime in and tell us about DART?
Okay, I'd be happy to. Thank you. Yes, and we have been talking a lot about DART. So it's the Drone and Advanced Robotics Training and Test Facility, just in case somebody's wondering what DART stands for. I know we are in the technology industry just amazing with all of our acronyms. So that's what it stands for. And just to step back for 1 second. So the DART facility is located at Area X.0. So for anyone who's not familiar with Area X.0, we are a secure and fully fenced and gated test and demonstration facility that's located right in the heart of Ottawa. We're 12 kilometers from Parliament Hill, and we run one of the most sophisticated telecommunications networks in North America. So the DART facility takes advantage of all of the capabilities that Area X.0 has in terms of its location. And one of the things in developing it, we sort of thought about, what do entrepreneurs and innovators need in order to move that really critical last mile towards commercialization? It's usually, in many cases, the first step is the hardest and the last mile is the most difficult. So, how do we really support that? So the DART provides access to resources that would be very, very difficult to replicate. It's an extremely sophisticated facility, first of its kind in Canada. And so these resources would typically be out of reach for most entrepreneurs. And so we really help our clients through utilizing the DART sort of to make that last mile. And in developing the DART, which we developed in collaboration with our partners at Indro and the other partners here at on the panel, it integrated the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or more commonly known as NIST, criteria into the design and the operations of the facility. And so it comprises 9 unique stations that would include various types of obstacles. So if you think of bunkers, that might include various levels of water, sand, gravel, various inclines that would be realistic in, let's say, an urban setting. So if you think of sidewalks, we installed a sidewalk that is exactly the same as a sidewalk that you would find anywhere else in the city of Ottawa, but then also more challenging inclines that you might find in an agricultural or an industrial setting. We also include things like visual barriers and physical barriers, so gaps between things, doors, stairs, as well as a tethered space and a netted space for the aerial robotics or the drones that we would be testing. So you can test things like, the communication system, so a lost signal or signal interference, as well as things like, and in Ottawa in particular, climate is really important. So, what's the effect of, wind conditions and rain conditions and snow conditions on these various devices. So in a nutshell, that's what the DART facility brings to the table. But more than that, I would say that it accomplishes three big benefits in my opinion, and I'd welcome the panel to chime in after. The first being, of course, access. So access to the facility and the sophisticated resources that we have, as I mentioned. But because of the sophistication of the site, we're also able to test things like autonomous, detect and avoid, simultaneous localization and mapping. So some of the more sophisticated characteristics that these advanced robotics would be requiring. And then, and I know we've talked about this already, but the support, and I can't overstate that. So in collaboration, obviously, with Indro, who are also co-located with us at the site. They have an office there, and they bring unmatched experience and expertise to our clients. Carleton University, so Jeremy and his team have ready access to the site. City of Ottawa, Omar, and all the entire stakeholder community, Drew, as well as the other partners at the site. So we would have other entrepreneurs that would be testing at the same time, and the collaboration within that ecosystem of partners that might be developing similar sorts of systems. If they are interested in collaborating, we can really facilitate that, and that makes a big difference. If on the other case, and I just want to point this out as well, if someone doesn't want anyone sort of participating in their test or demonstration, we can also make that happen. Of course, there's a lot of new IP being developed, and in some cases, collaboration is not necessarily desired, but in cases where it is, we can certainly facilitate it. And then finally, I would just say from the usability perspective, and I know Kate had mentioned about training, which is a key element. So if you're going to commercialize anything, you need to have skilled operators that can actually leverage the capabilities of whatever device it is that you're bringing to market. And so the DART is an ideal facility to support training and certification. So we've talked a little bit about micro-credentials. So, beyond a pilot's license or an advanced pilot's license, you will be layering additional micro-credentials that are specific to various applications in various industries. So, being able to manipulate the drone to either perform a specific function or to gather specific data or whatever it happens to do. And then you can do that in a fully 4-season setting. I don't need to tell anyone here that we have 4 big seasons in Ottawa, and the DART is outside. So we can experience that within the facility. But in a nutshell, that's what the DART facility brings to the table.
And Suzanne, I'll just say that the SOPs for testing your UAV at the DART are immaculate.
Thank you. Following those NIST standards.
Yeah, I was just thinking one time the mayor said, the thing about Ottawa is we get sunshine, we get rain, we get freezing rain, we get snow, we get fog, and sometimes all on the same day. Yeah. Further to this discussion, Omar, how does the DART make it easier for you for regulators to consider bringing new technologies in?
Yeah, I think we're not in the or ground drones yet, and that's only because we're waiting for as the provincial government starts to roll out their rules, and we'll be able to look and build on that. But just being there on the connected vehicle side of things, right? We've tested shuttles, we've tested there's a self-driving vehicle that's available and been built. All of those things are all capable of providing you that real ground truth, right? You can actually run it through test after test after test and actually get that confidence level to ensure that it's actually running and working fine. So, and there's so many scenarios that you can run, and whatever type of scenario that's necessary, right? Suzanne and the team will be able to kind of get those things set up. And there's farm fields available. There's wooded areas available if you don't want. There's ditches and culverts and everything else. So, I mean, if there's a place that you need to be able to test and you're wanting to test a specific scenario, there's a place somewhere on that facility that you can actually run it through. And that's what I think, the value, and as Suzanne mentioned, being so close to downtown, whether it's, a Transport Canada for roads or aerial and so forth, whether it's a city or whether it's other municipalities in and around, the province who want to be able to come here and test. That's, I think, the value, right? Is that, and you can be there with great teams like, the teams from India. You got, Jeremy and the students from Carleton are there on site, actually testing things, developing things, and that learning experience from, we have this project idea that we want to do to, okay, we've gotten through the testing, we've actually run a report, generated a report, and we've actually, demonstrated the results. All of that is sort of good experience for the entire community and the ecosystem to be able to take advantage of. So,
And Jeremy, in terms of, oh, sorry, got a bit of feedback. Jeremy, in terms of product development and research, how does the DART help companies bring products to market?
Yeah, I mean, again, as other speakers have said, providing that space where you can, conduct your trials, do your tests in a safe environment, where you also have access to, advanced communications, tracking capabilities, things like that. From our perspective, from an educational institution perspective, one of our products is people, is the HQP, or the highly qualified personnel. That's, part of our main mandate. So having a place where they can go, test out their concepts, fly their drones, particularly in the netted area. That's been quite a few of my students have been using that lately for tests that they'd like to do. So that's the sort of thing that is really beneficial to have. We don't have that on our own campus. Not very many institutions anywhere in the world have access to facilities like that. So having it in Ottawa, is fantastic, because it means the students can go and they can also interact with industry. They can see some other things that are going on, learn about potential employment opportunities and things they might want to pursue in their studies as they move along through the program. So all of that has been great. I mean, it's like I said, for us, it's as much about the people as it is the products themselves.
Oh, great, thank you. And then don't forget, as Suzanne mentioned, it's got one of the most advanced telecommunications networks in North America as well. Kate, let's get back to you. Seems like these days you can pick any industry, and with a little digging, there's an application for drones or robots. But it doesn't matter whether it's logistics, transportation, defense, agriculture, all of these things. What are you seeing as the most exciting use cases? Anything coming down the pipe we should be watching for?
Well, on the drone side of things, it's really going to open up once we get those regulations that I was mentioning earlier. So those kind of hub and spoke cargo, agriculture applications, that stuff's going to be very exciting. I think there's that catchy phrase that's often used for robotics where they're well suited for the dull, dirty, and the dangerous. And so that continues to be valid with the future applications. So one that we've seen come through both on the ground robot and with aerial robot side is manufacturing. So pretty exciting sector to be thinking about, like assembly line work, like pick and place, really precision, like dexterous robots that are able to do some of that work. A lot of inventory management. So we have a ground robot combo with an aerial robot that's able to work through a warehouse and scan to see what products are there, where they're located. So really takes a lot of that kind of monotonous grunt work away from folks that could be trained up. I really like the new acronym, Jeremy, the HQP. So we could focus on creating more high quality personnel within an organization, put the resources there, and then it's upskilling within the industry as a whole and getting rid of those really monotonous tasks, sending them over to the robot side of things.
That's great, thanks. And actually, one of the things that I come across from time to time are using robots in elder care or delivering drugs, prescription drugs. And the challenge we see there is the adoption. It's hard to ensure that people are ready to accept treatment from a robot or be willing to get prescription drugs over from a robot. So there is a lot of work in the humanities and social sciences work that needs to be done as well. Jeremy, what about you? Are you seeing what kind of advances, what new great technologies are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, just to build on something that Kate mentioned about the cooperative robotics, drones working with ground vehicles. I think this is going to be a very exciting area where there's, we'll move away from single vehicles, single ground robot, single aerial drone doing one thing, to fleets where you may have one drone with a thermal camera, another drone with a regular camera, maybe another drone with acoustic sensors, and a robot on the ground, let's say working collaboratively for search and rescue or agriculture applications, fleets of drones working with robotic tractors and things like that. So I think from some of the stuff that we've been seeing in university, that moving into these sort of cooperative, kind of scenarios where you've got multimodal drones and robots working together, and then dealing with all that data, sharing data between those different platforms coming in from different sources is also going to be a challenge. So that's one of the things that I see is quite big. And then of course the regulations changing will open up all of the beyond line of sight type operations as well. And I think that's also going to be very exciting for us.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, it's really watch the space. As Drew said, the regulations are evolving; they're still adapting. So we've got to try and take some mitigated risk at this point until we get there. Any further comment on that one, Drew?
I think you nailed it. Nailed it on the head. Is that right now? I think we're in a pattern of sort of risk mitigation, sort of using your imagination, see what do you think could be an issue, and then sort of mitigate against it. Like once we get those regulations that Kate was talking about, and so we get more clarity over what needs to be done, then I think it's going to be there's going to be a far clearer path forward for companies in terms of exactly what needs to be done to comply with whatever regulations end up being out there, whether it's municipal bylaws for right-of-way on the streets and the sidewalks, or it's using federally regulated airspace to do deliveries to maybe rural areas or remote areas, and interacting with airplanes and other things in that sphere. And then just, in terms of the data, I mean, one of the biggest considerations right now on that side of things is cross-border data transfers, specifically from the EU to the US. I'm sure everybody's heard about the struggles with GDPR compliance. Nobody really knows what to do or how to comply. The EU is currently being sued for non-compliance with the EU's own GDPR. So like right now, it is very much it's sort of left up to the companies to decide what to do. And so, working at an area like Area X.0, forgive the expression, and the DART, the DART program is just it's a unique opportunity to interact with the people who are actually drafting these things, and they're actually sort of putting these into law. And it's always great to get the actual like industry voices involved in crafting those, to make sure that companies don't have to scramble once they're implemented, to sort of go back to not the drawing board, but like sort of go back to the beginning, make sure that all of their processes are aligned with this new requirement that comes out. So it's a very interesting period of time, and stay tuned because I think it's going to ramp up very fast.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. All right. So far in this webinar, we committed to speak about testing and qualification. We spoke about the DART facility and how it fulfills this requirement. We spoke about laws, bylaws, regulations, steps to mitigate risk. And we've also spoken briefly about the path to commercial deployment, leveraging both university expertise and the NIST compliant DART facility. Let's go to audience questions and bring the rest of the community into the discussion. Audrey, have you got any questions for us? Shazad V asks, whom should I contact for preliminary guidance for project startup using drones for inspection of testing and infrastructure? That's a good question. So who should be contacted for guidance for a startup?
So if it's a project startup and you're interested in testing something that you're already developing and already working on, and if from a technical perspective, if you're interested in sort of working with the facility to develop a project, you would contact Area X.0. We have on our website, there's an intake form. You would just fill it out and it comes into our team, and we'll reach out and contact you and start the process of developing a project charter, which is really the way that we interact with most of our most of our clients, just to make sure that we fully understand what your objectives are and what you would like to accomplish, and that we have the assets and the resources available to support you. So that's the process that you would undertake if you were interested in actually developing a project to test at AreaX.O. But if your question is more about support for an actual startup from a business perspective, then Invest Ottawa has a number of different capabilities that you could avail yourself to. And we support organizations right from their inception. You've got a great idea, all the way through accelerate and scale up and venture capital, you know, the entire gamut. So we're here to support all entrepreneurs here in our city that are interested in building businesses and innovating with technology. So just reach out to us, and there's no wrong door. So if you reached out to somebody, they could point you in the right direction. I know it's complicated, so I don't want to leave you with the impression if you don't hit the right person at the right time that, you know, the door closes. It's not like that at all. We're all pretty supportive. So.
And then considering another element of it, if the idea is something which requires a drone or requires a robot, maybe Kate, you can talk about how Indro could support those applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, if Suzanne hadn't jumped in, it's like we can find you the right person. So feel free to reach out. Like has kind of been mentioned throughout, we've got quite a bit of experience through the development of the both ground and aerial robots, and then the training, validation, testing. So depending on where you're at, I know it said startup. I can't see the question anymore. I know it said startup at one point. So depending on where you're at, we can help you with that side of things, and also looking at creating the personnel to support that. So through the training, through Fly, our certification piece that we run as well.
And Jeremy, from your perspective, if it's a very early stage company looking to design or develop something, how can Carleton University help out?
Yeah, absolutely. Along the same lines, I mean, we have access to facilities, you know, both at our campus and also accessing facilities at AreaX.O. Additionally, funding. So being able to tap into, you know, leverage funding like MyTax, as well as NSERC and provincial funding and things like that. Those are things that university can help with, and that can bring in then students, co-op students, interns, and things like that, who can help with, you know, providing the you know, the talent needed to to get those products to market.
Oh, great. Hope that answers the question. Audrey, do we have another one? An individual from Yarmine store asks, can DART help with commercialization of already developed and tested robotics, specifically to government and industrial groups? It looks like there's one for you, Suzanne.
Well, there you go. Yes. So, I mean, the DART is really, I mean, it's there to support any sort of testing and demonstration training requirements that you might have. So if you've got something that's already commercialized and you're looking to expand your audience, or to expand your regulatory possibilities, then we can certainly facilitate that. You can continue to evolve your technology and bring in various regulators and various groups that might be able to support you in doing that. So, you know, whether it's additional engineering that could be supported by either Jeremy or Kate, or perhaps an additional aspect that needs to be tooled and developed that, you know, that can be added. So it really depends on what it is that you'd like to do. But the DART is there to support not only the initial commercialization of a product, but the ongoing evolution of that technology as it sort of goes through the various stages of its lifespan.
And I guess to that end as well, because it's a NIST certified facility, you do have a path towards that. You can come up with a certificate that says you've gone through this level of testing. Yeah.
And the same for the training. So that kind of goes hand in hand. So as you evolve the technology and you add new capabilities to it, you're going to need to make sure that there is, you know, some operators that can continue to support that device in its commercial application. And so, you know, the training can be evolved as you go through that process as well. And the DART is the perfect place to do that.
All right, got a couple more questions in. Audrey, what we've got next? Kirk L asks, I'm curious if there are specific jurisdictions in USA or Canada who are taking the regulatory lead in drone and robotic applications. That's a really good question. Who would like to champion this one? Jeremy,
could I jump in on that? What's interesting with particularly drones, with the regulatory development, Canada, as was mentioned earlier, is one of the leaders. We've been really leading the way with regulations for almost 20 years now with respect to drones and allowing commercial operations here well before the United States, and other jurisdictions have come to Canada and used elements of our regulations in their own domestic regulations. But one thing that's been happening a lot over the last few years is, rather than individual countries kind of going off and doing their own thing when it comes to drone regulations, is there are groups, particularly one known as JARIS, which is a group of regulators from around the world who are developing regulations to be shared across different countries. So rather than just everybody off on their own, they're sharing best practices, coming up with methods for analyzing risk, for assessing whether or not a particular operation is a hazard for other aircraft and people on the ground and things like that. So that more of that sort of forward-looking type of regulatory development, which is quite different from traditional aviation, where if you look at traditional regulations, they're almost like a fossil record of what's gone wrong and how the government has reacted to those, historical failures. I think with drones and things like this, we have to kind of be more proactive, right? Looking forward. And that is exactly what's happening now, right? People are thinking about what would we like to do with these platforms, and what rules do we need to make sure we can do it safely.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Kirk. I hope that answers your question. Audrey, let's get to the next one up, please. Nick T asked, establishing trust and developing social acceptance is a key step to the success of technology. But how do you communicate the results of your test to the average person? Wow, that's a really good question. Anybody want to tackle this? Well, I guess go ahead, Drew.
I can jump in, at least from sort of the legal privacy side of things. That's one question that I sort of get faced a lot in my practice in terms of helping clients deal with the privacy regulations. And I mean, one of the simple answers is to have a robust privacy policy on your website or whatever public communications you have. Maybe if you want to communicate those sorts of things, include a hyperlink or in your promotional materials, or promote a trust center or something that outlines your practices and procedures in terms of how you're dealing with data, what safety regulations have you complied with, what certifications do you have. And I think that's the easiest way to sort of get that out to the public, and just keep sort of pushing it down people's throats, forgive the expression, and just make sure that it's out there and that people can easily access it and figure out sort of what are you doing, how safe it is. And I think, and also like, what companies do you use to like support you in providing whatever services or goods that you're providing, such that they have an idea of this ecosystem of where their data is, how it's being handled, and the steps that you're taking to make sure that your technology is safe.
Yeah, I think, Tim, part of the other thing is the idea of these pilots, right? To be able to demonstrate that it works on a small scale. You don't go to, I'm going to have this vehicle drive everywhere, do everything all at once, and never, there'll never be an issue. Certainly, if you follow the connected vehicle and automated vehicle side of the space, Waymo's had very few issues. Cruise, unfortunately, has had a lot of issues of late. And so, it's a little bit of you don't want to throw out everything because one company is having issues. So being able to demonstrate that success and continued success is important. And there's another, I'll take a different tact of the way Drew mentioned it, but it's, people say that you have to repeat something 7 times before people actually hear it. That's a marketing speak, right? But that whole sort of thing is that people will hear it the first time, but it won't be until they've heard it enough that they recognize it. So these pilots and so forth make it easier. And if you just think of it, how many years ago would you have ever thought that you would just walk into someone else's home or their apartment and stay the night there when you don't know them at all, but you just rented and paid them some money? But now everybody seems to not mind renting it on Airbnb and staying at some stranger's house. So, I think these things become socially acceptable over time. And it's really a matter of making sure that, the whole industry moves successfully forward to be able to be a point where people think of it, oh yeah, it's just a drone driving by or flying over my head, not a big deal.
Right. I think it needs to be a certain level of co-opetition in this to so that everyone cooperates to get there. All right, Audrey, let's get to the next question, please. Renee M asks, how could we be supported to identify a cellular company to help in the data transmission with satellite link? Well, that's a really tough question. Anybody want to chime in on this one?
I don't know if that same intake form, Suzanne, that you mentioned before might might be suitable here, but Indro has also done quite a bit of work with cellular companies through several projects. So you can also feel free to reach out directly to me, and if I don't know the right person right now, I can help find that out. So if there's a more general entry route for that inquiry, then that can work as well. But feel free to loop me in, and I can try and support that.
Definitely, the intake form, as Kate mentioned, would provide you an opportunity to identify all of the different assets, touch points, requirements that you might have in order to do the testing or the development activity that you're interested in. And then we would then reach out more broadly to our ecosystem and our partners. So I know Jeremy would weigh in on that, Kate would weigh in on that, Omar and everyone else. So we would be able to help find you the right partners and resources through that process. Go ahead, Jeremy. I didn't.
Yeah, I was going to add, Carleton's had decades of experience in wireless communications, SATCOM, development of antennas, encryption and things like that. So likewise, feel free to reach out to Carleton or to myself, and I can, connect with folks in our systems and electronics department who are working, very actively in this area on 5G and 6G and sort of looking beyond even the sort of technologies that are currently deployed now to the next, wave of wireless communications. Can certainly help on that front too.
Yeah, I'd just chime in that having worked at Area XO, I know they've got equipment from the leading equipment manufacturers in the communication space. So it would be an opportunity to come to Area XO and test your communications on these systems. And then it makes it much lower risk. So when you do go to a wireless provider, you can say, well, we've proven it on these OEM systems. We know it's not going to break your network. It's going to contribute positively. So I think we're getting towards the top of the hour. We're going to wrap it up here. I'd like to thank the panelists. A fantastic discussion. I really learned a lot and enjoyed it. And we'll turn it back to Emily.
Awesome. Thank you so much, team. Thank you so much for our wonderful panel, for this very productive and enlightening discussion. It has been very wonderful to hear your insights and perspectives on the use of the drones and advanced robotics technologies and get a little bit of a sense of what is needed to be developed, improved, optimized, regulated, to increase their adoption at a large. So remembering everyone that if you need to access facilities to test your technologies, be sure to get in touch with AreaX.O so you can take advantage of the DART facility, which is the first center of its kind in Canada, integrating the NIST standards criteria into both its site design and training operations, as mentioned by Suzanne. And this unique site is a live setting comprising realistic mixed terrain and weather conditions that support testing of aerial and ground robotic technologies, including sophisticated attributes such as autonomous detect and avoid technology and simultaneous location and mapping. So having access to resources of these kinds would typically be out of reach for startups, but at AreaX.O, their aim is to support entrepreneurs from design through developing, testing, and commercializing their inventions, as we were discussing here. And if you need grants to support and fund your collaboration project with testing at AreaX.O, get in touch with me. From the Ontario Centre of Innovation side, we have a program called Collaborate to Commercialize, which is designed to fund research and development projects with a clear commercialization goals, like the ones that you can do and test here. And my lovely colleague, Tim Warland from MyTax, please get in touch with him as well. They sponsor collaborations with universities, such as the ones that Professor Jeremy Lalibert was mentioning, by funding interns who can bring new technologies and ideas to your organization. And last but not least, I would like to give a big thank to Tim for the panel moderation, as well as to the AreaX.O Invest Ottawa team, Rebecca Thompson, Audrey Wilsey, and Suzanne Cork for organizing this amazing webinar. And they have been great partners and catalyzers for bringing us all together in events like this for these nice discussions. So Thank you everyone for joining us today. A little bit of closing remarks here before we close off. I just wanted to share a few items. So we look forward to following up with a copy of today's recording to everyone who registered. Should you have any follow-up questions, do not hesitate to email Audrey, and we are gonna have the email here on the slide for you to see. And we are very grateful for any feedback you may have on today's webinar. And we'll be sending out as well a short survey later today to let us know what you think about it. Thank you very much and hope to see you soon.